ओके जी। तो आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे अ टर्म विच इज नोन एज एथिक्स, जिसको कि हिंदी में हम नैतिकता भी बोलते हैं। तो विल सी व्हाट कंपोनेंट्स आर द कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स ऑफ एथिक्स। तो बात यहाँ से शुरू करते हैं कि एक इंडिविजुअल की या एक सोसाइटी एज अ होल की कुछ बेसिक ओरिएंटेशंस होती हैं, कुछ डायरेक्शंस होती है जिस पे वो चलते हैं, एक पर्पस होता है। And at a very primordial level, the orientations, the purpose is food, security, social acceptance. And then you have these higher pleasures, आपके trips, traveling, clubbing and all of that, these dopamine inducing pleasures. But ले दे के एक बेसिक लेवल पे ये तीन चार आपके मेन ओरिएंटेशन है जिस पे आप चलते हैं एज अ इंडिविजुअल और यूनिट ऑफ सोसाइटी। नाउ when pursuing these purposes, we are faced with certain decisions. हमको ना डिसीजन लेने पड़ते हैं कभी कभी कि मान लो फूड चाहिए, तो shall I point a gun in the farmer's head or I give him money which I have earned? Obviously you will prefer the latter, because non-violence is a value which is deep enrooted in our heads, and in order to make these value judgments we need these norms or values, and these values are a byproduct of ethics or ethical frameworks. So ले दे के बात इतनी है कि in order to make these decisions towards these orientations we need certain frameworks in our head to make the decision making a simpler process. तो essentially यही ethical frameworks हैं। तो we'll see कि यार मेन कौन सी थ्योरीज हैं, मेन कौन से फ्रेमवर्क्स हैं जिसको हम दिमाग में लेके डिसीजंस लेते हैं। वन वी हैव रिलीजियस फिलोसफीज एथिकल, जो वो एथिकल फ्रेमवर्क जो रिलीजियस फिलोसफीज से आते हैं। फॉर एग्जांपल एब्राहिमिक रिलीजन्स में क्या है कि देयर इज गोना बी अ जजमेंट डे, जब आपके योर कर्म्स वुड बी इवैल्यूएटेड एंड देन यू विल बी ईदर ग्रांटेड हेवन और हेल. So that's basically their purpose of life in Abrahamic religions, and they conduct their daily lives around this. In Indian philosophies, there's a concept of universal consciousness, and let's say doing violence will take you far from that universal realization of that universal consciousness, and living an ethical life, a dharmic life, would take you towards that universal consciousness, and hence you'll able to realize that you'll attain a liberated phase and an eternal happiness. So that's what we have the religious philosophies से जो ethical frameworks निकल के आते हैं. But today we are going to discuss something else. Today we are going to discuss the secular religious frameworks, and these are my views only, these are my interpretations, feel free to ignore, but this is what I understand. So पहला जो main secular religious framework है, that is utilitarianism. ये एक फिलोसोफर थे, इनका नाम था जेरेमी बेंथम, इन्होंने दिया था। एंड बेंथम भाई का फंडा बहुत सिंपल है कि whenever you are faced with a decision, an ethical decision, you evaluate the facts in this manner, that do the thing which benefits the greatest or the greatest good for the greatest number. For example यार, essentially let's say आप जो है क्या एग्जाम्पल लूँ, अगर मैं झूठ, लेट्स से ऑनेस्टी, लेट्स टेक ऑनेस्टी फॉर इंस्टेंस, अगर आप झूठ बोलोगे किसी से, यू आर डिसऑनेस्ट विद समवन, देन दैट डिसऑनेस्ट विल क्रिएट मिसट्रस्ट, that mistrust will erode the societies, and then society will collapse. And hence speaking truth is an ethical decision according to Mr. Bentham, because it will create the greatest utility for the greatest number. और आप मेट्रो में बैठे हुए, you see an elderly person, it's generally considered an ethical practice to give the seat to him, because the utility that he will give from sitting in the seat is greater than what you will get. So that's Bentham's ka funda. But utility, this can be exploited. For example, let's take the example of Holocaust. तो हिटलर क्या कहता था कि जो आर्यंस हैं, जो हिटलर जिस रेस से था, they are superior than all other human races, and Aryans are the next step in the evolution of human race, or called Übermensch, and Jews or other other so other kind of people, they would pull the Aryans down in the evolutionary phase, and hence it's essential for the Jews to be prosecuted and eradicated, so that Aryans would survive and thrive. So he was quoting the greatest good for the greatest number, which is Aryans here, but it was a justification for the genocide he was doing to the Jews. So the utility framework can be exploited in this manner, and hence we needed a refinement, and that was given by someone known as जॉन लॉक. लॉक का कहना था, एंड बिफोर इवन गोइंग टू लॉक्स फ्रेमवर्क जिसका कि नाम था लिबर्टेरियनिज्म, let me quote an example. There was a case in UK in 1700, I think. The case was named as Dudleys versus Stephens. इस केस में क्या था, 3 लोग ना एक बोट पे स्ट्रैंडेड, they were stranded in a boat in the middle of a sea, and one was Dudley, one was Stephens, and one was a lonely kid named as Parker, जिसकी तबीयत खराब हो रही थी, and these people were hungry. They had not eaten for long. They were starving, and then they took this decision to kill Parker and do cannibalism, which is to eat Parker to survive. And when this case was presented in the court laid this particular foundation, that it basically set this precedent that in the common law across the world, that necessity is not a defense to a charge of murder. Basically, even if you are faced with the necessity to commit a crime, murder, that is not defensive, and hence hence punishment was given to the culprits. So basically, even if the greatest good for the greatest number is on the line, you cannot take away something called as individual dignity or consent. तो यहाँ से कॉन्सेप्ट आया कंसेंट का और डिग्निटी का, कि बेसिकली इवन इफ 1000 लोगों का फायदा हो रहा है एक बंदे को मार के, even then the individual dignity still holds a higher fought in the realm of ethical frameworks. So basically ग्लैडिएटर फाइट होते थे रोम में, जहाँ पे कॉलोजियम में एक बंदा जो है ही यूज्ड टू फाइट अगेंस्ट अ पैक ऑफ वुल्व्स, एंड 10,000 लोग को मजा आता था उसको देख के, that activity. So here as well, but John Locke said that even if the utility, the collective ecstasy of these 10,000 people is greater than the pain of this one person, even then this violence is not justified, because dignity holds a special place in ethics. तो यहाँ पे जॉन लॉक का आर्गुमेंट यह है कि इंडिविजुअल लिबर्टी इज हाईएस्ट. बेसिकली इंडिविजुअल अपने चॉइस से विदाउट हार्मिंग एनीवन जो भी करे, दैट कैन नॉट बी टेकन अवे फ्रॉम हिम. And then यहाँ से this was a very solid framework, but there were few loopholes in this as well. Essentially, then suicide bomber या फिर a person who is doing prostitution on their own will, or let's say a person want to sell the kidneys, or a child who wants to do a child labor on their own will, is that justified? Now those questions arise with John Locke, and these were answered by someone named, and I think this person was one of the greatest philosophers of a time. One second, I think I need to select the pen. Okay, so essentially तीसरा जो framework है, ethical framework, it's called deontological ethics by Immanuel Kant. So Immanuel Kant का फंडा बहुत सिंपल था, that the intent matters, the result does not, and uska supreme principle of morality was this, that since human is a free creature, and hence the humanity should not be taken as a means for an end. ये बहुत important line है. Basically means for an end नहीं होना चाहिए. Now इसका मतलब क्या है? Let's look at few example and then understand what this means for an end means. For example, I am doing dishonesty, and I'm gaining 1,000 rupees, let's say 10,000 rupees by doing corruption. Now, by doing dishonesty, I've used someone else, some person's money or that person himself as a means for my pleasure. तो उसका यूज करके मैंने अपना प्लेजर कमाया है. He is the means for my end, and that according to Kant is not permissible. You cannot use humans as a means to serve a purpose. Let's take the example of prostitution also. So Kant ने कहा कि prostitution में you're selling your body for money. There itself you are using your body as a means to earn your end, which is your liveliness. You are earning by selling your humanity. So even that is not permissible. So I hope you understand this, and I'm not trying here to explain all of these secular philosophies or secular ethical schools of thoughts in a very detailed manner. I'm just giving an introduction of all of these to kind of lay out what does ethics means and what place it holds. But what we'll do in the next video is we'll discuss something known as Swami Vivekananda's Vedantic view of virtue ethics. So essentially, what Swami Vivekananda followed as his own ethical principles, and how did he made these decisions in his life. So कुल मिला के लेने की बात इतनी है कि you need to make good, proper, right decisions in your life to achieve these orientations and these purposes. And इनके पीछे की बैकिंग स्ट्रांग होनी चाहिए कि ये जो डिसीजन आप ले रहे हो इसके पीछे का रैशनल ही है, either taken from secular philosophies or taken from religious philosophies. So basically this was what I tried to do right now, and these are my views only. If it resonates, then great, you can choose to ignore, but hope you liked it.